How's it going, everybody? This is Video Boy, and welcome to LibGDX Platformer Tutorial Series, episode 4 now it is. And this will technically be the last episode. I'll talk a little bit more about that after because it's not exactly the last episode, but it kind of is. But today we're going to be adding entity loading and saving, so you guys can load and save entities to files, to and from files. So that's going to be very useful. And yeah, we're also going to be covering some basic concepts that will also be used for networking in the future. But more on that at the end of the video. So let's get right into it. First thing we need to do is, in the entities package, we need to create a new class. We're going to call it entity snapshot. Now the entity snapshot will have some data about different entities, and yeah, basically that's it. So we'll have some stuff in here. We'll have an ID number, so we'll have private string ID. So this will be the unique ID for the entity. We'll have private float X and Y, and we're also going to have a hash map. Honestly, I'm not even sure if I've showed you guys how to do hash maps yet, but this is a hash map. So I'll explain the hash map in. Yeah, I did show you guys hash maps with the tile types. This is a little different though. I'll explain it in a second once we actually get into it a little more. So we'll have entity snapshot. So we need one method that doesn't do anything, one constructor doesn't do anything, and we're also going to create one with all the data. So string ID, float X and float Y, and we'll also take in a hash map here. So string data. Okay, and then we'll do all this equal to that, and this is equal to, whoa, I have no idea what that was. And this dot data is equal to data. Okay, so basically, entity snapshot keeps track of an entity in a certain point of time. So in Archipelo, I'm going to talk a little bit about Archipelo and how I do stuff in there. In Archipelo, I use this for networking, so I can give some data about an entity at a certain point in time. But I also use it for saving entities. So you can save their coordinates. Of course, you have their unique ID. Actually, we're missing one thing here I forgot about. We'll have the type string. And also this data hash map, which can store anything. And it'll be entity specific. So certain entities will have extra data in here that they can store. That not all of them will have, right? But all of them have an X and Y, all have a type and all have an ID. That's why they're here, those datas. Okay, so let's add the type in here. So basically we're going to be using these things. We're going to be getting a JSON from a file with this data, and we can construct entities with it. So we're going to need a few methods here. So some getters and setters. So let's generate the basic ones. We're not going to do for data. I'll show you guys how to do that after. Type X and Y. Okay. And we're also going to need a bunch of other ones here. So we're going to have void put float. Basically this will do data dot put. So what we're doing here is we're basically making it possible to put float or ints or boolean values inside the data here as strings, and then when we load them back up, they're still going to be strings, but we're going to parse them back into numbers. So public void put int So it's basically the same thing over and over. Here, I might as well just copy most of this, really. We're also going to do that for Boolean here. And I don't think we'll do any other ones than that. Well, we'll have string, of course. Oops, boolean. And string. And we don't need to do this here. Okay, and we're also going to have the get, so this is going to be a little different. So public void get float. And we're not just going to put the key like we normally do with hash maps, we're also going to have a default value. Just in case the key doesn't exist or it doesn't parse properly, we can use this default value. So it's just as a security measure here. So to do this, we're going to be basically checking if data dot contains. If it contains the key, then we'll go into here. Else, if it doesn't contain it, we're just going to return default value. This needs to be float. I forgot to do that. Okay, and then in here, we're going to be doing a try catch to try to parse the string at that key location, because it is possible that it isn't a float, but it most likely is. But it's just in case, so return default value. And then in here, we're going to return float dot parse float data dot get at the key location. So basically, we're going to try to get the data at this key location. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense right now, but once I actually start making the JSON for stuff, you'll see it'll make sense. And basically, we just copy these through like this. So we have an int here, int. This becomes integer dot parse int, and this becomes boolean. Of course, there are other data types, so we're not going to be using all of them. So just keep these basic four ones, these four basic ones here. Boolean dot parse boolean, and the string one is, we don't even need to parse because it's a string. It already is a string. So okay, there you go. So this might not make a whole lot of sense just yet, but I'm going to actually implement the entities thing here. I'm going to actually create a JSON file with the entities in here, and it'll make a little bit more sense. So I'll show you guys how to add entities, and it'll be pretty cool. Normally you should probably call this file the same as your map file, but we have a map.tmx and a basic.map for the two different kinds of maps. So I'm just going to call it entities, but I would suggest you guys like make some sort of folder structure for your maps. Okay. Basically, I'm not going to do a whole JSON tutorial here, but I'll show you guys the basics. So you have these opening, what do you call them, curly brackets here. Actually, I don't even think we need that. I think we just do brackets like this. And then within here you have the opening curly brackets. So in each one of these is going to be the data for your entity. So what you need to do is you need to specify an ID. So let's give it an ID. We'll say player, because we're going to add the player. We have the type. The type is also player. You have an X and a Y. So what are the X and Ys that we used for the map here? I think it's here. 40 and 500. So 40, y is 500. And here we have our data. So this opens up another curly brackets. So in here for the data, this is where we're going to be storing that extra data about the player. So if you look at the player class here, it doesn't seem like there's any actual data. But some other entities might need extra data like that. So just say it's like I don't know, like a mob spawner, something that spawns enemies. You would want a value like spawn rate, and then in here you could put a number. You can put like 43 or something. I don't know what you guys would want to do, or you can have spawn radius, and it can be 200. So that kind of thing. So these values here don't have anything to do with the player, or probably any other entity than if we had then the enemy spawner. These would only be for the enemy spawner. So that's why we have this here, is so we can specify extra data specifically for that entity, and then we can load them in later. But for the player we don't have any, so we're just going to, well, I'll just do this. We'll leave it blank like that. If you guys have noticed, we'll close it like that. These keywords here, the ID, type, X and Y, have to be the same as these ones. That's just how LibGDX's JSON library works. It's going to be using these values and loading them in. Actually, these need to be public, I believe. I haven't tested it yet, but I'm pretty sure they need to be public. It kind of sucks because now we don't have restricted access to these variables from the outside, but you're the programmer, so you'll make sure that you don't do that. And let's save that. Okay, so now we actually need to implement the loading for the entities. So we have entity type here, and we're going to need to add a new parameter. So we already added the type string, so that's important. Basically, it's going to be loading using the same string as this. So if we have our type in the JSON as player, it's going to look for the player entity enum, and it's going to load based on that. But there's another thing we need to add in here. So let's do this. Class, and we've got a loader class. And also have it in here, so loader class, this dot loader class is equal to loader class. Whoops. Here we need to put the actual class. So that class will be player.class. And I think here we can actually specify entity like this. Oh, no, we can't. Just remove those here like that. No, it's for this. We need to put this warning here. Put it at the top here. Whoops. We basically just need to do that so it gets rid of the warnings. Don't worry about that too much. And now with this loader class, we can actually create entities on the fly without having to call stuff. So if you look in here, we're doing entities that add new player. So we won't have to call this new player thing anymore. We'll actually be able to create entities programmatically using this file here. So what we need to do is we need to create a method here. So it'll return an entity, and we're going to call it create entity using Snapshot. So this is going to return an entity that is created using an entity snapshot. Loaded in from the file. Alright, sorry, I'm a little bit sick, so I had to cough there for a second. So yeah, let's add this in now. So we're going to basically have a new entity here. And how we're going to load it is we use this thing called a class reflection, and then we do dot oops, hold on a second, I think I forgot the name of the method here. Dot new instance. Okay, and then here we're going to be passing in loader class. Yeah, we have to put a try catch here, so that's fine. We'll do that. We can put a custom message here. Chances of this happening aren't very high, but it can happen. I just realized another problem actually. Yeah, we'll deal with that after. Basically in here we'll just do gdx.app.log. Maybe we should do .error. Entity loader cannot load entity of type. And we'll put, okay, hold on. Here we have to put entity type. Type is equal to new entity type. No. Okay. We'll just put type.id. Okay. So we basically need to do the same thing that we did for the tile types. We need to make a static hash map. So let's do that real quick. Public static, no, private static. Okay, so this is going to basically keep track of all the entities so we can get them by the IDs. And then here we do a for loop, so we do entity type, type in entity type dot values, and then we'll do entity types dot put type dot ID type. There you go. Okay, type is equal to entity types dot get entity snapshot dot type. Sounds super redundant, but that's okay. Type dot loader class. I guess here we'll return null. And here we can return entity. But we will need to do one last thing here. Okay, so we have this done now. So basically what we're doing is the snapshot has the entity type, right? If you look here, it has the type, so it's player. And this is going to find the corresponding entity. So it's going to look at this ID for each entity. So if you guys want to add more, you can. It's basically the same constructor as this. So it's going to try to find the entities with this ID, the same ID as the one here. So a player is going to get this entity type. Then with that, it's going to actually create an entity object. We don't know what kind of entity it is just yet, but that's fine. And then we're going to have to do something else here. So we have to modify the entity class now. So let's do that. Now the thing we need to modify is we need to make sure that the entity class has an empty constructor. So basically what we're going to do is we're just going to end up creating a void here to replace the constructor in a sense. So we're going to have entity snapshot. And also put the game map, and we also need the entity type as well. We can't forget that. That means that, whoops, entity type actually needs access to the game map. That's okay. So we'll do that as well, like this. Import that. Okay. Now let's move this over to here. And now the x and y we need to get from the snapshot, so we can do snapshot.getX, snapshot.getY, and we'll remove the constructor completely like this. Now the player, we need to do pretty much the exact same thing. So we'll have the create method here, and we'll call super.create first, and then we'll get into this. Basically here we can just do that like this. That should be okay. Let's put this in here. And we don't need to do anything else in the create here. So just say you guys implement some sort of new enemy spawner entity. What you're going to have to do is just say you'll have like a float value here, like spawn radius. If you want to get the value for spawn radius, what you basically need to do is you do spawn radius is equal to snapshot.getFloat spawn radius, and then you would put in a default value. So just say you want your default value to be 50. Just in case the spawn radius value doesn't exist or something, we want to give a default. And that's it. So basically, this is how you get values for a specific entity, but our player doesn't have any values like that, so we won't put it. I'll also show you guys how to save those values later on. Alright guys, so basically I'm going to end off this episode here, and like the last episode, it's going to be split into two parts because it's a little too long. Again, it was around 43 minutes. So it's going to be split into two episodes, so this is the end of this episode, but if you want to watch the next one, it should be up at the same time, so you can go watch it there, and I guess I'll see you there in a couple minutes.